As we lead into the route split, we find Nemo at the Stone Ruins, discussing his options with Ritsuko Akagi. No, seriously, the character Electric here was later one-for-one adapted into Evangelion's Ritsuko, with both characters being fanatically devoted to a widower that hasn't quite gotten over their wife. Ava's definitely the worst depiction, considering it's implied that Genu Ikari took Ritsuko as a mistress, whereas Nemo's tried his best to not take advantage of Electra's affections. Though, in the problematic ending of the series, it is revealed that the two did have sex at least once, so Electra would eventually give birth to their son. Ultimately, the pair decide to stay around Wataru, as the Atlanteans have an old pact regarding the Dragon Savior to assist him in any way they can, even if Atlantis itself is a collapsed civilization. But with the Knights having grown so large, well, the lot have reached a point of cross purposes where there's two goals that have to be addressed. For Daniel has received orders to provide more information for his allies on the land of Mana, which Ange wants nothing to do with, while Wataru wants to keep focused on fighting Dwakdar, with it ultimately being decided that all the fantasy mechs will stay on that offensive, while the real robots will return to the Mana lands to survey them. I decided to do the Dwakdar assault route first, but like when I reviewed V, I will be doing all the missions in parallel so you, the viewers, will get the whole story. Besides, how else will I talk about certain things? Unfortunately, that involves first and foremost a return to Arsenal, and we once again that CX is doing absolutely nothing to fix the problems of many of the series they are including. As like V, which nipped this problem in the bud, when we return to Arsenal, all of Ange's paramale compatriots are back to being horrid Valkyrie bitches. Now again, the initial problem with Cross Ange was the needless character antagonism it started out with that only got resolved because Mitsuo Fukada told Tatsuya Higuchi to knock it off. So that was instead shifted into being the early series' extremely bad start, followed by the character and narrative arcs that even the series out, with most of the initial antagonism seen resolved in its entirety as of the show's 7th episode. Minus the Hilda stuff. And that is the problem X created for itself, as it set Ange and Vivian's return to be at episode 7, with this sect of the Knights encountering the Gravity Dragon that got the Paramel team to finally settle their differences. But because the events around all of that are not different, it means the events that resolve the needless inter-character antagonism never occur. So the grand majority of the rest of the game, the usual suspects of Cross Ange's crew that treat Ange like crap, namely being Salia, Hilda, Rosalie, and Chris, continue to treat not just Ange, but each other like garbage. When it was so goddamn simple to just set Ange and Vivian's patrol that got them caught up in X's plot after episode 7, as there is a notable void in time between 7 and 8, where one could set anything to occur, thus leading to the absence depicted in X. And thus, these girls being catty with each other, it's not welcome, as it has no reason to exist anymore. X's writer has revived a dead aspect of their storyline, solely because it hadn't been showcased in X yet, when it didn't need to be. And again, the reason why V so well handled Cross Ange was because they killed this nonsense early instead of letting it fester far past the point it should have been allowed to exist. But X just leaves such to fumble around like a zombie. This is again why I feel that swapping Hilda for Vivian would have been far better for this story as well, as Hilda and Ange do canonically desert Arsenal at the end of episode 8 of their series to resolve their familial stuff, which would have served as the better point of intersection for Cross Ange's mid-series, where the pair are dragged back there anyways. As when that plotline later gets done in X, it then invokes nothing but plot redundancy, which could have been remedied with just some better planning. But instead, everything that is bad about Cross Ange just never fucking stops in X far past the point it did in the canonical story. It makes the series seem like it is worse than the anime actually is, validating the opinion of those who stopped watching it after its heavily problematic first episodes. This is worse than choosing not to fix the problems of the included series. This is in fact exasperating them. Not made any better by Salamande of the Dragon Tribes appearing again as a mystery enemy unit, to just show once more how they've mangled the series, as unless they were willing to set the Cross Ange part of the story to be later than they want it to be, then she really should not be appearing yet. Regardless, Nemo intervenes to settle the matter as best he can. Having been an interim ally of Jill's regarding Jill's own efforts against Stupid Hair, as Stupid Hair in this universe had a hand in Gargoyle causing the collapse of Atlantis' civilization over a decade ago, which actually times itself to around when Jill led her own rebellion against Stupid Hair herself, explaining a lot about how things were gone about this time. That's why Nemo gets full command over Salia's squad to get them out of Arsenal's territory. But again, without resolving the interpersonal antagonism, that is a requirement for handling this specific series correctly. If you all watching this feel like I'm sticking on this point too much, well, let me be a bit more frank. One of the reasons X is so much more of a slog isn't because it involves more series I don't care for, but because I'm being made to hate just so many of the characters it continues to focus on within it with how the writer is depicting them. This is not a good thing, and the reason I keep comparing it so negatively to V is specifically because of how well V handled hostility to disarm it across the board. Moving on, the Arsenal girls are astounded by the alternate magic systems present outside of the land of Mana, which they still can't use, which takes their attention off of harassing Ange, for the most part for the moment, as the Nautilus group is put on the trail of a group of rogue giant mechs that have appeared near a village along their path of travel, which leads to the introduction of Maito Senpujin and the cast of My Gaine, the rogue bandit mecha all being members of the Dark Syndicate that are his enemies, as they were transported here out to the complete boonies away from anyone and anything else, and have just been meandering around without purpose. Mifune and Vuitton having been confronted with regards to their antics by a certain teacher that's chosen to live out here, the steel sniper, Yoko Littner. Oh, I wish this game had actually let me have Yoko with just her sniper rifle here as a unit in combat. Hell, even as an included attack chain supporting Gurren Lagann, as it is forever until she gets her own mech in this game, despite her cameo appearance here. Why the hell did they not let her in here anyways? For Gurren Lagann units, it really is just Gurren Lagann for too long in the game, to the point I forgot about her cameo here. It's like, the entire reason she's here is she's a teacher right now, yeah, but the kids she's teaching are in danger. Let her get in the frickin' mech. I'm not even one of those who has a problem with her settling down to become a teacher like she did. It's her life. After losing someone she loves, it's clear she wants to be away from conflict unless it's absolutely necessary. But from a game perspective, she's among the most popular characters from that series for what she brought to the table. Not like that. The world is in danger. That danger is dragging it down on those she cares about. So, let her get in the freaking mech so she can be a unit and not have her be wasted until the late game stages. Plus, her heavy assault gunman would have fit well with the rapid introduction of Mike Gaine's train-based mecha that afterwards takes center stage into the introduction, an entire district of their world having been teleported to this realm, and not just the Brave Express Corps in specific. Though something I will give this game a bit of credit for over V, X at least includes special combining sequences for these mecha, taking from their original stock footage archives, which V did not do. So showing off the smoothness of Mike Gaine's combination, that certainly earned some points. But regardless of that, the storytelling suffers from the same problem most of the others have. Disassociated from their original setting, a lot of the weight of these encounters is just absent. They want to play by the engine their story ran off of, but operating off their rails in the wilderness just doesn't allow them to hit right. Even though the story does establish that the Brave Express Corps are from the same world of peace that Waltrue himself originates from, to try and deepen the story connections there. Maito takes the group back to Auto City, which as said was transported to this world entirely intact, done so to permit the My Gaine mecha to have their support industry for operations and repairs, since their needs are distinct from the other mobile units. The game also begins a short-lived subplot, with Simon's Nia happening to also be traveling the lands after she rejected Simon's marriage proposal, just as eager to find herself as Simon is, and understand why she said no. And Simon just happening to keep missing her. We get a scene of the Mike Gaine villain faction formally falling into Dwokdar's villain camp thanks to Purple negotiating their contract, permitting them the resources to build a missing member of the cast. Nia ending up captured by them when she walks right into the ship of Mike Gaine's angry scientist Wolfgang, after she caught sight of Wolfgang's men leaving the town and wondering, well, who would be going out into the woods on their own? But because she wandered into a construction area, her life ends up saved by Black Gaine, who only recently came online and is still part of this group, as he just doesn't know any better. And by the time he does, he's already had the AI hijacking control device put back on him so as to recreate one of the best episodes of Mike Gaine. Again. The twist to this recreation of this event being Nia's intervention to tell them all that Black Gaine's an ally that needs their help, and not just another villain to be vanquished. Which in turn leads to the introduction of Banjo Haran! Yes, Banjo Haran, Super Robot War's own secret weapon used for the purpose of avoiding unneeded character deaths. I will likely never get around to watching his series, but I respect the crap out of his use at preventing the worst of Sunrise's fatality tropes time and again, even though he is once more a character from a series that plays no real part in anything. Thus, he has no reason being here. Black Gaine trying to talk through the slave program confirms Nia's words, and with Wolfgang's help alongside the power of, positive thinking, the group managed to feed back the control program and destroy it. Yeah, that don't work, but it's a shortcut to just getting Black Gaine on our side without making it a special unit recruitment or delaying any further the character's inclusion. After all, there's not that many series involved in this one, so every unit counts. Nia also decides to join us on this trip as a background supporter, though she and Simon for some reason don't renew the relationship for reasons that are very poorly explained. In the series it's due to other events going on that screw that all over. But here, the best we get is she herself doesn't understand why she said no, so went on a journey like him to just as much seek to find and understand herself, so she may grow up and be worthy of reciprocating the love she shares with Simon, just as he is himself doing for her. This completes the Dwokdar assault side of the route split, which we really didn't end up doing much in, thus swinging us back to the Mana investigation side, where it is expanded more on why Danielle's superior, a man named Klim, even wants this investigation. Apparently he tried to negotiate with Ange's brother Giulio Mitsurugi earlier to get everyone to a state of ceasefire to try and understand the larger situation with everyone being teleported to this Earth, and Giulio completely rejected his overtures as not really seeing a difference between any of these displaced forces. On one hand, it's G-Reco, and negotiations always break down in UC-associated series. On the other, Giulio is a goddamn idiot whose own actions lead to the complete collapse of his own civilization. He was manipulated by stupid hair, yes, but he was still aware of what he was doing. As such, the more Klim knows about the Land of Mana, the faster he can put together a battle plan to address all the various aggressors in play. All while Alba and Bellry are making a mess of morale with them pulling their ignorant bullshit all over again. Beginning to echo Nadia's words that it's better to just return to their respective worlds and wash their hands of Al-warth entirely, regardless of what the Capital Guard or Zogilla does here. Hypocrisy! Thy name is many, many Sunrise protagonists that follow the Tamino model. This is said as part of Alba again escalating animosity with Dio, who is dead set on stopping Zogilla how he can, due to Dio's own belief in moral justice, and he cannot forgive the atrocities those aligned with Zogilla have done to drag innocent people into the international conflict. And I hate to make Alba's argument for him, but again, Zogilla was attacked first. Hell, I didn't mention it before, but Zogilla was originally a freaking micronation before they found the series MacGuffin, and then somehow expanded the territory they controlled after they got attacked. Like, even Germany had allies that helped make the Nazis seem like a bigger threat than they were, and only got a chance to conquer as much as they did because of so many nations bending over backwards to appease their aggression. The entire reason the Germans lost World War II was their forces were so divided and spread out that it was only because of misinformation that the Axis powers appeared to have actual strength. So a tiny nation having enough manpower to conquer a significant enough portion of the world to be a global threat with their rapid expansion? Yeah, that doesn't gel, even with giant robots around as a type of terror weapon to make the conquered populace submit, simply because there would not be enough committed soldiers to their cause to maintain control in a hostile takeover. At the very least, Zeon and their Site 3 colonies had millions and millions of people to legitimize that. That doesn't quite as much happen with Zogilla in this. After all, the big problem with Alba is he is completely incapable of empathy towards those who have lived through the atrocities of their conflict, thus has little to no perspective on the matter that others might. So Dio's looking down on Alba is time and again justified because Alba can't get his head out of his ass. And the reason Dio is angry at Alba about this and throughout the following stage is because Dio's sister Fiona was left crippled thanks to one of Zogilla's attacks that got civilians caught up in the crossfire. To shorthand this, Dio is a loose XP of Lelouch, while Alba, I can't even say he's a Suzaku XP because he's just that stupid about everything. But before this can boil over for them to settle it this time, the ships get an alert of oncoming mobile suits nearby. Said units happening to belong to Zex Marquis and Lucrezia 9. Both of basically the only Gundam series I haven't talked that much about in video form yet. New mobile report Gundam Wing. So, I'm in the camp that actually really enjoys Gundam Wing. Case in point. But the show is unfortunately not the most clear on the direction of its storyline, though that is unfortunately by design. You remember when I talked about how Code Geass had a significant amount of its canonical story told outside of the anime itself in audio and picture dramas, as well as character messages due to Sunrise wanting the story to be stupidly ambiguous what the original writer did not? Well, that was not the first Sunrise series to make itself overly reliant on tie-in content. At the time of Gundam Wing's release, the magazine New Type was a regular publication, and thus became part of a multimedia campaign Sunrise and Bandai had set up to release a tie-in manga series for Gundam Wing that would tell the backstory of the characters so as to less clutter the main series itself. To my knowledge, Sunrise had never done this before this point. Gundam The Origin would come years and years later, and it frustratingly meant that central context to what the story was doing and its general narrative direction was not immediately clear, both in Japan and when it was exported internationally. Hell, I'm betting most of you didn't even know Viz actually released the manga way back in the day, and this is before Tokyopop got the license to release the rest of the Gundam manga. This book is so old, it's from that era where they flipped the printing of the manga, so it reads left to right instead of right to left because they thought the books wouldn't sell if they were in their original Japanese formatting. But yeah, Sunrise's tie-in manga problem wouldn't stop for a while after, though the next most egregious one of people missing context for something explained actually happened during Gundam Seed, where in the tie-in Astray manga, the character Lo Guile was deliberately given crossover moments where he tied into Seed's main plot during his manga. Central to that being the initial rescue of Lacus Klein from forces attacking her when she visited Junio 7 in Earth's debris belt, which would then lead to her meeting up with the Archangel. And then later on, it was Lo who was responsible for getting the critically wounded Kira Yamato to medical attention, after the Aegis self-destructed to take out the Strike Gundam at the series midpoint. If you read the tie-in, you knew what had happened, and the story results only had no plot holes. But the problem then becomes creators should not make critical, need-to-know information be hidden inside of tie-in material. Once more, Code Geass being the worst example about that of all of Sunrise's series, thanks to its movie continuity deliberately disregarding all of the previous canonical content Okuchi kept having to lace outside the main series itself. It wasn't until Gundam 00 where Sunrise seemed to finally get a handle on that. As while the 00 manga's content is canon, the main series is not contingent on you knowing about it. Wing? Not so much. its story effectively starts in media res, doesn't go back to give context to what was skipped, and then proceeds to act like you are already tuned into what the arc of each character is supposed to be. This is not Wing's fault. This was an executive meddling decision performed by Sunrise. The show's staff just had to live with. And yet it's remained the biggest hurdle with introducing people to Gundam Wing in specific. As well, for many of us who grew up with Toonami, it was the first Gundam series we saw at all. As more Gundam series became available, we collectively became more aware that there was something missing from the depiction of Gundam Wing's story. You get the gist of where it's going with time to make it better on repeat viewing, but confounding the audience from the start with the abrupt intro isn't the best. We legitimately needed to know this book existed, and most people still do not. Wing is the story of the After Colony timeline, which has been recently dominated by the newly formed Earth Alliance militia, who are themselves being supplied and manipulated by a secret cabal of societal nobles, known as the Romefeller Foundation, and their militant arm called Oz, that are vying for control of the entire Earth sphere, and treating the people as little more than toys among their schemes. Oz's members have put into motion Operation Meteor, a plot to drop one of the Earth sphere colonies upon the planet, before having 5 superweapons developed in secret attack the Earth in order to breed for the people an enemy that Oz would then defeat. The entire plot a false flag operation to bring about world peace by deceiving the people into siding with those who wish to dominate and willingly give up their freedoms in the name of security. The plot, however, does not go to plan, as the 5 scientists that have constructed these superweapons, the series Gundam units, have chosen as their pilots 5 teenagers with attitude who hail from the long-oppressed space colonies, who seek to confront Oz's actions and expose them, changing Operation Meteor from a scheme that will lead to world domination into one that instead rebels against the upper caste of society, from which all evils inflicted upon the world spring when they try to steal from the people their right to live how they wish. Complicating that rebellion, however, are 2 men, Treize Khushrenada and Zex Marquis, who also come to oppose the way the upper echelons of Oz operate and stage their own acts against them. The series' ultimate culmination being twisted by the 2 into an all-out confrontational war, where their ultimate plan is to make everyone being put on the chessboard become completely and utterly sick of the war game escalation, and finally choose to stamp down on would-be tyrants and this nobility that started this game without a second thought. Both men martyring themselves to end this conflict and take the nobility out of power, while allowing the Gundam pilots who helped inspire their own rebellion to be hailed as the heroes of a setting that come to reject the view of war as a game.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
There's a lot more to it than that, of course, but that last bit of the ultimate culmination of the series being Zex and Treize's grand scheme to call an end to conflict is one of the things that is most misunderstood about Wing, at least from the view of solely the anime series. The manga retelling of the series, Glory of the Losers, actually clarifies a lot of the details of the series and does its best to include more of the supplementary material the original version of the story frankly lacked connection and context to. For those who don't like Wing, I recommend that version of the story to you, as it will likely fix many of your problems with it, atop just plain awareness of the Episode 0 manga existing. Yet, even if I find the series more flawed than I originally did, well, you just can never forget your first. This scene at the beginning of Wing's first episode was just that damn impactful when the series originally aired on Toonami in the early 2000s. And I'm glad this was the one they chose to do first. As well it might not be the best show, it is one of the most clear with its respective "the AU Timeline series bar age all build themselves upon criticisms of the UC timeline" theme. And that one is, it is the people who are in power that make the common man's lives hell. So to place the blame for a conflict upon those who are being oppressed when it is the oppressors that are in the wrong is itself a fraudulent notion, As in the majority of UC Gundam series, the protagonists are part of the problem in serving or enabling the actions of the tyrannical forces of the setting by never allowing those that do the most wrong to the people to be punished for it. Or to put it in other terms, Wing was the first Gundam series to actually have the leads of the series focus on defeating the individuals and organizations that were actually the problem causing all of their conflicts within their setting. Not the symptoms of the issue, but the actual underlying disease. Even for people who may like G from the previous year, you gotta admit it didn't quite do this, even with the ways it did bring attention to the fact that the cyclical conflict was being used as a distraction that made people ignore how none of those in power were keeping their promises to fix things. Wing was just better at this because it remained overt with its rebellion against the world. But, if you want me to say something really negative about the show, well, I can provide you one. Chang Wu-Fei is a useless character, barely does anything, and could have been excluded from the story entirely. The main Gundam pilots consist of Hiro Yui, Duo Maxwell, Trowa Barton, Katra Rababa Winner, and the aforementioned Wu-Fei. And if you didn't notice the theming to their names, yes, each of them has a translation to their name that refers to a numerical 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the first four actually have storylines within the series or points of relevance in their tale. Duo being the snarky badass normal who views himself as the Reaper due to the people around him repeatedly dying. Trowa wanting to find a purpose as he was an orphan that lived life without even a name until he was chosen as his pilot's unit. Katra acting in conflict with his family's pacifistic beliefs by striking out against tyranny, and how he fights acts against how he was raised. And Hiro has the strongest storyline connections of the series, with him being the son of an assassin who killed a political leader of the same name as Hiro from the colonies that advocated for peace. And he himself was trained from his youth to be a killer as well. But when his first act against Oz killed a civilian girl he met when planning the raid in the Crossfire, it psychologically broke him. Thus Hiro's arc is a man wishing for his own death, but wanting that death to have some form of meaning.
I surrender, but I will not hand over the Gundams. I repeat, I surrender, but I will not hand over the Gundams.
Mission accepted.
And yet, unlike the later series that spoofed this storyline, the universe refuses to let Hiro die for a specific reason. Him surviving horrific injuries, because the point of his story is that death does not equal redemption. To repent for your sins, you must act in a way that shows you understand what you did was wrong, and seek to make up for it every single day. And for Hiro, for taking the life of innocence in the way he did, he must then do the hardest thing he can with such a weight on his soul. He must learn to live with it.
I will. I will survive! Wu-Fei, tell me, how many more people must we kill? How many more times must I kill that girl and her dog? Zero will not tell me anything. I will never kill anyone ever again. I don't have to anymore.
Once again, this is an example of how Code Geass screwed up with Lelouch and Suzaku, due to how much of that series drew basis from Gundam Wing. But Wu-Fei has none of these storylines his character goes through, or any actual tangible change over the course of it when the story does decide to include him, which is not often in comparison to everyone else in the cast. Hell, the story itself doesn't even allude to the fact that he was married young due to family traditions, and Treize was responsible for his wife's death, which explains everything about why Wu Fei spends the series having a hate boner for the man in specific, and why it's ultimately him that kills Treize as thematic closure for that. But it is an arc and conclusion that is literally invisible in the series without the Episode 0 manga. Which goes back to the reason they even included him, and that was because of the 5-man band rule a lot of Japanese series do with collaborative teams or groups due to the superstitions revolving around the number 4, with it being associated with death, and that being a bad thing, so they avoid that number whenever they can. 3 is too few, can't do 4, sweet spot for many of them is 5, give or take a 6th ranger for their group, like both Zex and Zex's paramour Noin end up becoming for Wing. But Wu Fei's pointlessness as a character would end up being noted, and they'd finally end up doing 4-man groups of units in both Gundam Seed and more prominently 00. Beyond that, Wing has some of the best thematically set mobile suits in the franchise. They can be a bit over-specialized at times, but the general frames all have their own appeal with how, for the lack of a better term, regal they respectively feel. As if the retro-futuristic design aesthetic of a group of old-world nobles trying to control a modern world had itself been transposed onto the very units of the series. Between the Death Scythe's beam scythes, the Sandrock's curved blades, Heavy Arms, well, just everything about Heavy Arms just works. The Tallgeese as a dangerous prototype on par with the Gundams was a great story engine for the series' Char clone Zex himself. And frankly, for many of us, Zex was a better execution of Char's own character arc as his actions consistently made sense, as he wasn't written to have contradictory values later on. Moreover, the Wing Zero was a game changer with regards to how upgrade mechs for a series are handled, especially with its Zero system, a predictive AI program that uses combat probabilities to depict the future. And it was amazingly used not just as an engine of destruction, but as a means to drive the story forward with both its danger to the pilots and those who seek to propose and abuse it for their own whims. With the advance of technology becoming dangerous even to their users playing into the arc of people treating all of these dangerous weapons as little more than toys to be broken and which to break others. The bottom line is there is a lot to like about the series and what it was trying to say, probably why it even got its own OVA story extension so soon after its conclusion, which not a lot of Gundam series did. But thanks to the just general problem of Gundam in the 90s where existing Gundam fans hated every AU timeline because it wasn't UC Gundam, fans that were sick of UC Gundam were going to come back even when a new timeline did pop up, as they didn't trust the brand at the time, and new fans were not going to be brought on easily due to how it started in media res. So it wasn't one that got a chance to really see the merit of the material until after it had been imported to the West half a decade later. Now it's more well received overall, but I'd still say for a new entrant, go for Glory of the Losers, if not only as a supplement used in tandem with the original anime. Anyways, Zex Marquis, the Char clone of the series, is here in his Tallgeese 3 mobile suit alongside his paramour Noin, who all things considered became for many the 7th member of the combat band, with how she was the best and regularly came to ally with the Gundam pilots in the series, and survived without injury despite being an active combatant. More of this, please, consistently. Also, when is your mobile suit the Taurus getting any type of a model kit? Seriously, there are a ton of units from Gundam Wing that have never seen production as a high grade at any point. Not just the Taurus, where is the Aries, the Cancer, the Pisces, the Virgos? Bandai's legitimately running out of units to make high-grade units out of, to the point they're making models out of units from manga. Yet there's still ones that showed up in their main series anime that have never gotten the treatment. They have escaped from Mitsurugi territory with another Valiancer pilot with information on the region, but are being chased by Zogillian forces and members of the army of Marimea Kushranada, Treize's biological daughter, who is the central antagonist of Wing's OVA series Endless Waltz, after she was manipulated by a man named Akeem Barton into rallying the forces of everyone who didn't want to stop fighting to try and claim power for themselves. Unfortunately, again, the amount of story being adapted is very short, and completely removed from the content that permits proper expansion of that story beyond the inclusion of the characters and their sprites that came from Super Robot Wars Z3 4 years previously. Hell, when I was writing this script, I literally blanked on whether Marimea even appears in this game or not. She's in it that little. Zex and Noin hold off these forces to prevent them from trampling upon a nearby city, but there's too many and they start to get past the pair. And even when the rest of the night contingent arrives, they're charging on the city too fast to counter. Bellry brings out one of the G-Self's alternate equipment packs, the Reflector Pack, to try and absorb and deflect shots from them. But when they start spreading out around the area of effect the reflectors work at, all seems over. You know, I complain about this working, but the G-Self's Reflector Pack all bases itself upon the manipulation of the electric fields of beam weaponry to diffuse them enough to drain their charge and repurpose that energy, as opposed to UC Gundam's usual nonsense with Minovsky particles. Plus, the Mercurius and Virgo units in Wing had the Planet Defensor remote shield weapons, which created electromagnetic fields themselves that blocked and dissipated beam fire. It's just those would usually overheat and break down when subjected to enough firepower, and couldn't properly disrupt weapons that could generate a continuous stream of beam energy, such as a beam saber, as the repulsion of magnetic fields would cause the barriers to break down with enough time. Regardless, we can chalk that up to Wing Zero predicting that this would actually work, Hero diving down in Gundam's Angel of Death, and completely destroying the attackers in one fell swoop. You wouldn't think a unit just spinning in place would make for such an effective showpiece to its power, but frankly it's in how little the Wing Zero has to do in order to wreak utter annihilation is why it is so intimidating. Though I have a critique in that, that's the Wing Zero's only map attack, when you would expect it to have not just an everything around you one, but a directed assault one based on how the Wing Zero can basically erase entire cities and colonies from existence on its own. I don't know, maybe Hero locked out that level of power due to the game being terrestrially based. Maybe it might have to do with the Buster Rifle's higher end performance actually leading to the gun massively overheating when used in atmosphere. That's actually how the Wing Zero breaks down in Endless Waltz after all. All I know is the Wing Zero's one of the most powerful units in Gundam, and the fact it's not allowed to show off its full capabilities in X is disappointing. Then again, the Tallgeese does have its own directed energy weapons map attack on its own, so for all I know the game designers intended for the pair of them to have a bit more attack diversity between them, so one wouldn't get so focused on using just Wing Zero to destroy everything. Though due to the unit's high movement speed, it is ridiculously easy to get behind enemy lines and then spam that map attack. Just Zex and Hero easily mop up all these enemy forces on their own. And I finally deep into this game get some nostalgic fan service of those two fighting together, and not against each other. The Wing Trio introduced themselves and freely offered to join up, explaining that they previously took refuge after being teleported to this world, landing in the Mitsurugi Empire. But when Julio tried to use them as military pawns, they just straight up got out of there. Hero himself having been attacked on sight, as when he arrived, the Mitsurugi had already made a deal with the Marimea army. And it's for the same reason many of the other factions are. Julio is selling them away to return to their homes so they can continue their original military campaigns, size the opposition to them that would remain trapped on Al-warth. Thing is, Julio really doesn't have that power. Oh, the Mitsurugi Empire is responsible for the dragon gates that abduct the dragons to their world so they can murder them and then feed their carcasses to their all-mother dragon Aura, to then use her as the power source for their civilization's magic. And yes, for those who didn't watch Cross Ange, or play V, or see my reviews of V, that is 100% canon for that series. But the dragons don't necessarily live on the same worlds as many of these others. Thus, Julio is, for all intents and purposes, promising something he can't deliver. Oh, his boss Stupid Hair can probably do it, but then again, these armies didn't make a deal with him, and Stupid Hair cares nothing about territory control in the first place, as such petty rulership he considers beneath him. Granted, the Zoglians aren't showing much sign of intelligence themselves, as we get a scene of them where their cultural mandates seem all based on shows of strength and obedience, that might make all the right of it, and they're completely unaware of how little of it Giulio actually has any control over. All the while ostracizing Hina because of Alba's nonsense she's been inflicted by that has made her lose standing through the perception that she's a sympathizer to someone on the other side, potentially even a traitor. But this scene also gives us insight on why Biazon has such a hate-on for Alba in his future, and that is he is a complete simp for Hina as their childhood friends, yet she in no way returns his affections. Dude, just accept that she's just not into you! And yes, him being friend-zoned is the central reason he later goes psycho and travels back in time to try killing Alba. Worse, it turns out Wu Fei, as at the time he was still part of the Marimea army, has been assigned to them in order to be able to take on Wu Fei's former compatriots. This group leading an assault on the Twilight Knights as they are seeking to rendezvous with the remaining members of the Wing cast. This stage is supposed to be another major story flag moment for the buddy complex characters, with Hina trying to present her devotion to the cause, and Alba breaking orders to try talking sense to Hina, with Bellry and Seabook foolishly enabling actions that could get them all killed, and I am largely apathetic to the lot of it. Neither Buddy Complex nor X have in any way invested me in actually caring about any of the involved. So other characters I already disliked for their impulsiveness, and those that I do being bent over to enable their nonsense, are not things I find appealing. Especially as it seems like Ida is the only one trying to talk sense, and Hina has a legitimate grudge due to Alba ruining her life. After all, as Hiro says in this stage, no soldier who fails to understand the meaning of war can ever hope to end one. And that is a really good line. Can be applied to a whole host of characters and series. Hiro is using it in promotion of Alba's position, not a condemnation of his actions. What the hell? This is where Wu Fei comes in to have his argument with Hiro, as happens in Endless Waltz, and it's debatable whether the changed reasoning present in X is better or worse than the canon series. For those who haven't seen Endless Waltz, I admit it's been a few years myself, the reason Wu Fei gave for why he was fighting for the daughter of the man who murdered his wife was because he wanted to figure out if peace at the expense of lives could truly be called peace. In case you are all wondering, yes, it is very likely Susaku had many of his worst character traits based on Wu Fei. For the answer to that question is, yes, you idiot! Because wars happen when the sides of it have irreconcilable differences or one commits an unforgivable act upon the other. Peace after an outbreak of conflict comes when either all of one side are dead, or it is determined that a continuance of the conflict serves no further purpose. The cost of doing war is inevitably paid in people's lives, and to continue war when you gain nothing from it is a cost-sunk fallacy where you only pay more to get nothing back.
Never spend more for an acquisition than you have to.
Basically, Wu Fei in Endless Waltz was approaching the question from the perspective of the idiot who had already solved the problem, both in terms of the war and its cause that was behind the irreconcilable differences, but did not understand that he already had the solution and just kept going as the solution felt unfulfilling, thus increasing the overall cost he was complaining about in the first place by denying the people the peace they were owed after the expense that was paid. In X, however, well, Wu Fei's reasoning is arguably just as stupid, having done what he did for all the soldiers who no longer had a place in the world, nor reason to live. Thus, continuing to fight would give their lives meaning! Again, grand majority of soldiers don't think like this. They don't want conflict to continue endlessly. When the war ends, they can go home. Most that serve in the military have families and people important to them, have other skills and trades they can return to now that the need for their services has ended. Hell, world peace doesn't by default mean all conflict is over. There would still be self-defense militaries and peacekeeper organizations. And even in Wing, there were with the Preventers organization. So it's not like they'd be just outright abandoned. And even in the case that their home was destroyed like Wu Fei's was, that doesn't mean they can't find a new one and start over. It will be hard, yes, and the traumas of war will be a barricade against easy socialization. But the only reason one would need to go to such extremes is if their originating nation completely abandoned their own responsibility in supporting their well-being. Which, well, we have a wealth of examples of those who have dropped the ball on caring for the mental well-being of their enlisted.
Back there I could fly a gunship. I could drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here I can't even hold a job. Fucking guys! Ah!
So in both cases, it is Wu Fei projecting his own problems onto others that he didn't want to admit to himself. He killed the man who ruined his life, yet didn't feel any fulfillment from it. Thus he didn't want what he felt was a worthless piece, or he felt he himself was being abandoned because he deliberately isolated himself from those who still gave a damn about him out of pride, and lumped himself in with others with that like mindset. But in either case, in him doing so, he only enabled and escalated a new source of the very malice he had originally fought against, which is where it seemed like the Wing writers finally found a proper role for the guy, in him being the one that is always in the wrong for the most foolish and reality-ignorant of reasons. And I adore Hero's reason you suck speech here as how completely sidestepped the justifications Wu Fei pretends to have to just declare how he's only made things worse for those who have hopes for the future and want to have something, which is what Wu Fei does not. And the fact it's Hero of all the Wing characters, the guy who recovered from being suicidal over the course of the series, that is condemning Wu Fei over his self-destructive acts and enabling, is what makes it hit all the harder. And thus, it's such a condemnation that it forces Wu Fei to look at himself and make him join the group to help repel the Zogilla aggressors. With him comes the awareness that every group allied with the Mitsurugi are likely being played, but without any other options, Julio's making them all dance to his tune, even as the lower echelons can see Julio as the incompetent that he is. However, with so many members of these enemy factions' elite units being around, it's likely their head administrators are all in Al-warth as well. I mean, everyone is here as if it were a Smash Brothers game, so why wouldn't they? And they might be able to cut off the heads of their respective snakes if they could just find them, which Duo, Tro, and Katra may be able to help with, as they've been out investigating the region as well. Or at least they were, as more of these elite core members have found them investigating another of the Land of Mana's developed regions, which recycles near verbatim the same map as one of the previous stages. Though the game at least puts a spin on it, making it so that these three units, who do not have map attacks, have to hold off a large army from penetrating into the city, including weapons called bugs that are designed to specifically massacre civilian population centers. And speaking of, I didn't mention it earlier, but each of the Wing units got a remodeled design for the Endless Waltz OVA that becomes their default appearance in Glory of the Losers. And of the group, Death Scythe Hell's is the worst redesign, both in aesthetic and capabilities. The entire meaning behind the unit's motif is supposed to be the Grim Reaper. That is why the torso vents are made to appear as if they were skeletal ribs. Atop that, Death Scythe is supposed to have a grappler claw and stealth system, to get in one's head the idea that you cannot escape the Reaper. He will appear before you when you least expect it. These were both removed in the Endless Waltz redesign, so the unit that is supposed to be a stealth specialist is lacking almost all of its signature equipment, including the stealth drive. What is even the hell? And no Super Robot Wars game has restored that to it to date, but it should have. I will give credit where it's due to the Glory of the Losers manga, however, and that the manga introduced the retcon that the Death Scythe Hell actually had those /Hark and grappler claws moved to deploy from the Death Scythe skirt armor, so it wouldn't interfere with the wielding of the scythe. It didn't fix the problem of the missing stealth drive, but it was at least an improvement. And for us owners of the master grades, there was eventually an upgrade set made to provide those parts, as well as those for the Ultron that gives it back its dragon wings and tail. With the overall retcon being that these pieces of equipment were damaged at the climax of their story, to just not be repaired by the time Endless Waltz began, so they weren't operating with all the equipment they should have had. The fact also explaining why the Endless Waltz Wing Zero also lacked its shield and the additional equipment that it got as well. Though this group doesn't have to worry about holding the line for long, as straight out of nowhere, this is where the cast of Double Zeta Gundam comes in. Again. And since I was so critical of their introduction in V, this actually ended up a lot better timing to include them, as they're not intruding on another cast establishment as they did there. Judao Ashta and his crew coming in to thin the numbers and defend the town. Moreover, this introduction is better for another reason as well. For the Double Zeta Gundam cast are actually given something of a role in this, as the Zogilians in fact have among their number a brainwashed LPO Peru, who is sicked on them as a rabid attack dog. Judao shocked to see her, as from his perspective, she's supposed to be dead. Yeah, the Double Zeta cast are from their post-series, and their timeline basically went to script up until Sharp's counterattack started early. The Peru sisters dying included in that, at least until now. The 9 members are all in on rescuing Peru as they're promptly informed of the situation, instead of the subject being made ambiguous. Though even when they knock sense into her and break the brainwashing, well, Peru's death occurred at a time when she thought she was responsible for the death of Judao's younger sister, Lena, which ended up being false as original Gundam character Salem Mass had actually gotten her to safety. So what Peru's blaming herself for and feeling genuine guilt for, yeah, this is a free opportunity to absolve her of that, and bring her in on our side as well. While also interrogating one of the elites to try and get an idea for why Mitsurugi's rounding up only the antagonist groups into service, which even they have no idea to. Probably has to do with so many enemy units not being playable ones, so story contrivance. And speaking of story contrivances, as the battle winds down and everyone catches up, it's revealed that Seabook knows Judao's group, and Judao and Ru, despite being in the Battle of Axis and the Double Zeta and Zeta respectively, were in different units when they found themselves in Al-warth. Ru being in the Re-GZ unit Amuro used early in Char's counterattack, for some reason, while Judao was demoted to the Zeta. This story contrivance is here just so Judao wouldn't have the Double Zeta immediately, nor would Camille Bidan be around to get the Zeta back, as is the norm for these games. Where Ru, in turn, keeps getting shafted on unit assignments. Joke's on them this time, though. Due to many pilots being swappable among the UC timeline units, I get to put Ru in the new Gundam later, as it isn't just for show. Mitsurugi also tried to recruit them, but since Judao is a world-wise character, he could tell Julio was a creep, so their group ditched them to look for another way home. With so many groups either bringing people here, or those gates being generated by another power entirely that should be able to be found. Which is where we're going to call it for now. For next time, begins the event that even warranted me even wanting to review this game, with it heralding the return of the man who is nothing. And I just realized I've had these upside down. And that's gonna be an outtake.